General Sarah Chen stood on the command deck of the human battleship Defiance, watching the stars blur past through the reinforced viewing port. Her dark eyes reflected the distant glow of enemy ships that had been hunting her fleet for 3 months. The Galactic Empire had underestimated humanity once before, and that mistake had cost them dearly. Now they were determined not to repeat it. The war had been raging for 5 years. What started as a simple territorial dispute over mining rights in the Kepler sector had escalated into a full-scale conflict that threatened to tear apart the known galaxy. The Empire, with its vast resources and countless alien species under its control, should have crushed the small human colonies within weeks. Instead, they found themselves locked in a brutal stalemate with a species they had dismissed as primitive. Sarah had earned her rank through blood and brilliance. At 32, she was the youngest general in human military history, known for her unconventional tactics and her ability to turn seemingly hopeless situations into victories. The Empire had placed a bounty on her head worth more than most planets' annual budgets. She wore that bounty like a badge of honor. "General, we're receiving another surrender demand from the Imperial flagship," reported Commander Torres from the communications station. His weathered face showed the strain of months on the run. "Admiral Kethavar is offering the same terms as before." Sarah didn't need to hear the terms again. Unconditional surrender, immediate cessation of all human military operations, and the relocation of all human colonies to designated sectors under Imperial supervision. It was slavery with fancy diplomatic language wrapped around it. "Send the same response we always send," Sarah replied, her voice steady and cold. "Tell Admiral Kethavar that humans don't surrender. We either win, or we make the victory so costly that our enemies regret ever starting the fight." The bridge crew smiled grimly. They had heard variations of this response dozens of times, but it never lost its power to inspire them. These men and women had followed Sarah through impossible odds, watching her turn defeats into strategic advantages and disasters into opportunities. Sarah moved to the tactical display, where holographic representations of both fleets danced in deadly formation. The Imperial force outnumbered them 3-1, with ships that were larger, better armed, and more heavily armored. On paper, the humans should have been dead already. But paper didn't account for human ingenuity, desperation, and sheer bloody-minded stubbornness. "Status report on the fleet," she ordered. 67% operational capacity across all ships," replied Lieutenant Yoshi from the tactical station. "The Courage is running on backup power after that last engagement, and the Pioneer has lost primary weapons. But crew morale remains high, and our pilots are still the best in the galaxy." Sarah nodded. Her people were exhausted, running on caffeine and determination, but they hadn't broken. That was the thing about humans that the Empire could never understand. Other species had limits, breaking points where they would submit to superior force. Humans seemed to have a genetic inability to accept defeat, especially when their backs were against the wall. The tactical display showed their position relative to the Imperial fleet. They were being herded toward the Vorthan Nebula, a region of space known for its unpredictable energy storms and navigation hazards. Most species avoided it, considering it too dangerous for military operations. Sarah had been studying the nebula for weeks, and she was beginning to see possibilities that others missed. "General," called Dr. Elena Vasquez from the medical station, her voice carrying an unusual note of urgency. "I need to speak with you privately." "It's important." Sarah glanced at the doctor, noting the tension in her shoulders and the way she avoided eye contact with the rest of the bridge crew. Dr. Vasquez was not prone to dramatics, and if she said something was important, it usually was. "Commander Torres, you have the bridge," Sarah announced, following the doctor into her private ready room adjacent to the command center. The ready room was spartanly furnished, containing only a desk, a few chairs, and a wall display showing star charts of their current sector. Sarah had never been one for decorations or personal touches. Her life was the war and everything else was secondary. "What's the situation, Elena?" Sarah asked, settling into her chair and gesturing for the doctor to sit. Dr. Vasquez remained standing, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that Sarah recognized as her way of delivering difficult news. "I've completed the analysis of your blood work from last week's routine physical." Sarah frowned. "And? You're pregnant, Sarah. About 6 weeks along." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stared at the doctor, processing the information that seemed to come from another universe entirely. Pregnant. In the middle of the most important military campaign in human history, while being hunted by the most powerful empire in the galaxy. That's impossible, Sarah said finally. I've been on contraceptive implants for years. The implants can fail under extreme stress conditions, Dr. Vasquez explained gently. The constant combat, the irregular sleep patterns, the medication you've been taking for that shoulder injury, any combination of factors could have caused a failure. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her mind racing through implications and complications. A pregnant general commanding a fleet. The Empire would see it as weakness and opportunity to exploit. Her own people might question her judgment, her ability to make the hard decisions that war demanded. How certain are you? She asked. Completely certain. I ran the test 3 times to be sure. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of this new reality settling on her shoulders alongside all her other responsibilities. When she opened them again, something had changed in her expression. The doctor recognized the look. It was the same expression Sarah got when she was about to do something that everyone else thought was impossible. Elena, I need you to keep this information strictly confidential for now. Not a word to anyone. Of course, but Sarah, you need to consider your options. This changes everything. Sarah stood up, moving to the star chart on the wall. Her eyes traced the patterns of stars and nebulae, seeing connections and possibilities that hadn't been there moments before. No, Elena, she said quietly, a dangerous smile beginning to form. This doesn't change everything. This changes everything for them. Dr. Vasquez left the ready room with strict instructions to maintain absolute secrecy, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the star charts. The silence felt different now, heavier with possibilities she had never considered before. She placed a hand unconsciously on her stomach, still flat beneath her uniform, and tried to process the reality of what was growing inside her. For the past 5 years, Sarah had lived with the assumption that she might not survive the war. It was a cold calculation that every military commander had to make, the acceptance that duty might require the ultimate sacrifice. She had been comfortable with that possibility, even found a certain freedom in it. But now everything had shifted. The child changed the equation in ways that the Empire could never understand. They saw pregnancy as weakness, vulnerability, a biological limitation that proved female humans were unsuitable for command positions. Sarah had fought against that prejudice her entire career, proving her worth through victory after victory. Now, ironically, that same prejudice might become her greatest weapon. She activated her personal communication system and sent a coded message to Captain Maria Santos, commander of the intelligence vessel Shadow. If anyone could help her understand the Empire's current psychology, it would be Maria. The Shadow specialized in deep reconnaissance, intercepting Imperial communications and gathering intelligence on enemy movements. Within minutes, Captain Santos appeared on the holographic display, her weathered face showing concern. General, what can I do for you? Maria, I need a complete psychological profile on Admiral Kethvar and his command staff. Everything we know about their cultural attitudes, their decision-making patterns, and specifically their views on human biological functions. Captain Santos raised an eyebrow. That's an unusual request. May I ask what you're planning? Something that will either end this war or get us all killed, Sarah replied. How quickly can you compile that information? Give me 6 hours for a comprehensive report. But Sarah, if you're planning what I think you might be planning, you need to be very careful. The Empire's xenobiology experts know more about human physiology than most humans do. Sarah nodded. I'm counting on that. Get me that report, Maria, and make sure it includes everything about their breeding practices and child-rearing customs. After ending the communication, Sarah returned to studying the tactical display. The Imperial fleet was maintaining its pursuit pattern, slowly herding the human ships toward the Vorthan Nebula. Admiral Kethvar was a methodical commander, known for his patience and his ability to think several moves ahead. He had never lost a major engagement, and his reputation for ruthless efficiency was matched only by his reputation for honor and victory. Sarah had studied Kethvar extensively during the war. He was a Xeraphim, a species known for their logical approach to conflict and their complex social hierarchies based on breeding rights and genetic superiority. The Xeraphim considered themselves the most evolved species in the galaxy. and they had built much of the Empire's social structure around their beliefs about genetic purity and reproductive success. The irony was perfect. The Empire that saw humans as genetically inferior was about to face a pregnant human general who refused to surrender. In Seraphim culture, pregnancy was considered sacred, a time when females were revered and protected above all else. The idea of a pregnant individual leading a military force would be incomprehensible to them. Sarah's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message from the bridge. "General, we're detecting unusual energy readings from the Imperial flagship. It looks like they're powering up their main communication array for a system-wide broadcast." "I'll be right there," Sarah responded, straightening her uniform and composing her expression. Whatever was about to happen, she couldn't let her crew see any uncertainty or distraction. Back on the bridge, the main display showed the Imperial fleet in formation around the massive flagship Eternal Glory. The ship was easily 10 times the size of any human vessel, bristling with weapons and armor that represented centuries of Imperial technological advancement. "What's the nature of the broadcast?" Sarah asked as she took her position at the command center. "It appears to be directed at our fleet specifically," reported Lieutenant Yoshi. "They're using diplomatic frequencies, which suggests they want to negotiate." Sarah considered this development. Admiral Kethavar was not known for his willingness to negotiate from a position of strength. If he was initiating contact, it meant something had changed in the Imperial command structure, or he had received new orders from the homeworlds. "Put it through," she ordered. The main display shifted to show Admiral Kethavar himself, his reptilian features composed and dignified. His scales were a deep blue-green that indicated high social status among his people, and his eyes held the cold intelligence that had made him one of the Empire's most successful commanders. "General Chen," he began, his voice carrying the formal cadence of Imperial diplomatic protocol, "I bring new terms from the Imperial Council, terms that I believe you will find acceptable." Sarah remained silent, her expression neutral. She had learned that silence was often more powerful than words when dealing with Imperial diplomats. "The Council has recognized the unusual tenacity of your species," Kethavar continued. "They are prepared to offer your people autonomous status within the Empire. Your colonies would maintain their current governments. Your military would be integrated into Imperial forces as an auxiliary unit, and your people would be free to pursue their own cultural practices within Imperial territory." It was a better offer than Sarah had expected, but it was still surrender with prettier wrapping. The Empire was feeling pressure from other fronts, or they wouldn't be offering any terms at all. "And in return?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying across the void between their ships. "Immediate cessation of hostilities. Your fleet will stand down. Your defensive positions will be handed over to Imperial administration, and you will submit to genetic cataloging and reproductive monitoring." There it was. The Empire's obsession with genetic control and breeding management. They saw humans as potentially useful, but only if they could control human reproduction and genetic development. It was exactly what Sarah had hoped to hear. "I appreciate the offer, Admiral," Sarah replied, her tone professional and measured. "However, I'm afraid the current circumstances make it impossible for me to accept those terms." Kethavar's expression didn't change, but Sarah could see the slight tension around his eyes that indicated surprise. "What circumstances, General?" Sarah paused, letting the moment build. Every person on both ships was watching this exchange, waiting to see how the most important negotiation of the war would unfold. "I'm pregnant, Admiral." The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah could see the shock register on Kethavar's features as he processed information that didn't fit into any of his strategic calculations. A pregnant military commander was beyond his understanding, a variable that his careful planning hadn't accounted for. "That is impossible," he said finally. "I can provide medical verification if you require it," Sarah replied calmly, "but I think you understand what this means for any negotiation between our forces." Kethavar's image flickered as he consulted with his advisors off-screen. Sarah could imagine the chaos erupting on the Imperial flagship as xenobiology experts and cultural advisors tried to explain the implications of this revelation. When Kethavar returned to the screen, his composure had cracked slightly. "General, this changes nothing. The terms remain the same." "I'm afraid it changes everything, Admiral. By Imperial law, specifically the Seraphim reproductive accords that form the basis of Imperial genetic policy, Any pregnant individual is considered to be under divine protection. Military action against a pregnant commander would violate those accords and call into question the legitimacy of the entire campaign. Sarah watched as Kethvar's eyes widened with the realization of what she had just done. She had turned the Empire's own laws and prejudices against them, creating a legal and cultural trap that they couldn't escape without undermining their own authority. "You cannot be serious," he said. "Completely serious, Admiral. I have a proposal for you." Admiral Kethvar stared at Sarah through the communication link, his reptilian features showing a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. The bridge of his flagship had fallen silent as his advisors scrambled to understand the legal implications of what they were facing. "What manner of proposal?" he asked finally, his voice carefully controlled. Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "A simple one, Admiral. Trial by combat, single ship engagement, winner takes all." The silence stretched between the fleets as Kethvar processed this unexpected development. Trial by combat was an ancient imperial tradition, rarely invoked but still legally binding under the complex web of laws that held the Empire together. It had been designed for situations where standard diplomatic solutions proved impossible. "You cannot be serious," Kethvar replied. "Trial by combat requires both parties to have equal standing under imperial law. You are not a recognized imperial citizen." "Ah, but that's where you're wrong," Sarah said, pulling up a holographic document that she transmitted to the imperial flagship. "According to the Territorial Acquisition Protocols of 2387, any military commander defending territory claimed by the Empire automatically gains provisional imperial citizenship for the duration of hostilities. The human colonies are claimed imperial territory, therefore I have standing." Kethvar's advisors were frantically checking legal databases, confirming what Sarah already knew. She had spent months studying imperial law, looking for any advantage she could find. The bureaucratic complexity that held the Empire together was also its greatest weakness. Furthermore, Sarah continued, the Zeraphim Reproductive Accord state that any pregnant individual under imperial protection has the right to invoke trial by combat to resolve disputes that might harm their offspring. Since your military action directly threatens my unborn child, I have that right. Captain Santos had delivered exactly the intelligence Sarah needed. The Empire's own laws, designed to protect their complex social hierarchy and breeding customs, had created a loophole that a desperate human could exploit. "Even if we accept your legal standing," Kethvar said, his composure beginning to crack, "trial by combat cannot be conducted by a pregnant individual. It would violate the same accords you claim to invoke." Sarah's smile widened. "Which is why I'm not proposing personal combat, Admiral. I'm proposing ship-to-ship engagement with designated champions. My flagship against yours. Winner takes command of both fleets and determines the outcome of this sector of the war." The implications of this proposal rippled through both fleets like shockwaves. If Sarah won, she would gain control of the Imperial Task Force, effectively doubling her military strength and dealing a crushing blow to Imperial prestige. If she lost, the human resistance in this sector would be ended. "The odds are completely in your favor," Sarah pointed out. "Your flagship outguns mine by a factor of 10. Your crew outnumbers mine 3-1. Your shields and armor are superior in every measurable way. What could possibly make you hesitate?" Kethvar's image flickered as he consulted with his command staff. Sarah could imagine the heated discussions taking place on the Imperial Bridge. The Admiral was trapped between legal obligation and tactical common sense, between honor and practicality. "There must be additional terms," Kethvar said finally. "Trial by combat requires specific conditions to be met." "Agreed," Sarah replied. "The engagement will take place in the Vorthon Nebula, neutral territory with environmental hazards that will test both ships equally. Both vessels will enter with minimal escort, say 3 support ships each. The engagement continues until one flagship is destroyed or surrenders. And if you win, all Imperial forces in this sector withdraw immediately. Human colonies maintain their independence, and the Empire agrees to a non-aggression pact for a period of 50 years. And if we win, total human surrender. All resistance forces stand down and we submit to whatever terms you choose to impose." Kethvar was silent for long moments, calculating odds and consequences. From his perspective, it was an impossible situation. The legal requirements were clear. He had to accept the challenge or face charges of violating the reproductive accords when he returned to Imperial space. but accepting meant risking his career on what should be a certain victory. "I need time to consult with Imperial High Command," he said. "Of course," Sarah replied graciously. "You have 6 hours to provide your answer. After that, I withdraw the offer and we return to normal hostilities." The communication ended, leaving both fleets in tense silence. Sarah turned to face her bridge crew, all of whom were staring at her with expressions ranging from admiration to terror. "General," Commander Torres said slowly. "Are you completely insane?" Sarah laughed, a sound that carried surprising warmth. "Probably. But consider our alternatives. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of supplies. In a conventional engagement, we lose within days. This way, we at least have a chance." "What kind of chance?" asked Lieutenant Yoshi. "The Eternal Glory is a dreadnought. Our main guns can barely scratch its armor." "That's true in open space," Sarah agreed. "But the Vorthan Nebula isn't open space. It's a graveyard of ships that thought superior firepower was more important than superior knowledge." She activated the main display, showing a detailed map of the nebula's interior. The swirling clouds of gas and energy looked chaotic, but Sarah had been studying them for weeks, identifying patterns and currents that others missed. The nebula's energy storms interfere with targeting systems and shield harmonics. Size becomes a disadvantage because larger ships can't maneuver quickly enough to avoid the worst of the interference. The Eternal Glory was designed for open space warfare, not environmental combat. Dr. Vasquez appeared on the bridge, having been summoned by Sarah's earlier message. "General, I need to speak with you about your condition. The stress levels you're experiencing could be dangerous for both you and the baby." "The baby will be fine, Elena," Sarah replied. "In fact, the baby is the key to this entire strategy." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "I need all of you to understand something. The Empire sees pregnancy as weakness, as a limitation that makes females unsuitable for command. But they're wrong. Pregnancy doesn't make us weak, it makes us desperate. And desperate humans are the most dangerous force in the galaxy." Captain Santos appeared on the communication display from the shadow. "General, I've been monitoring Imperial communications. They're in complete chaos. Admiral Kethvar has been in constant contact with High Command for the past hour. The legal department is going crazy trying to find a way out of this situation." "Can they find one?" asked Commander Torres. "Not without violating their own laws and losing face throughout the Empire," Santos replied. "The Seraphim take their reproductive accords very seriously. If they refuse a legitimate challenge from a pregnant individual, it would undermine their authority with dozens of member species." Sarah nodded. "Which means they have to accept. The question is whether they'll try to cheat." "What do you mean?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "The Empire has a lot of advanced technology that they don't normally use in combat situations. Weapons that are considered too dangerous or unpredictable for standard warfare. If they're desperate enough, they might be willing to break their own rules." Sarah moved to the tactical station and began pulling up specifications for various Imperial weapons systems. "Lieutenant, I want you to run simulations on every possible configuration the Eternal Glory might use. Assume they'll bring their most advanced equipment and ignore their usual tactical doctrine." "What about our own preparations?" asked Commander Torres. "We're going to do what humans do best," Sarah replied. "We're going to improvise, adapt, and overcome. And we're going to use every dirty trick we've learned in 5 years of fighting a war we weren't supposed to survive." Over the next several hours, the Defiance became a hive of activity as the crew prepared for the most important battle of their lives. Engineers worked around the clock to optimize their systems for the unique conditions of the Vorthan Nebula. Weapons specialists jury-rigged modifications that would have horrified safety inspectors. Navigation experts plotted courses through the nebula's most dangerous regions. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, making decisions and giving orders while constantly aware of the life growing inside her. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was preparing to risk everything, including her unborn child, on a plan that depended on the Empire's respect for pregnancy. 5 hours and 47 minutes after their last communication, Admiral Kethvar appeared on the main display once again. His expression was grim, but his voice was steady. "General Chen, the Imperial High Command has reviewed your proposal. Despite strong reservations, we are legally obligated to accept your challenge." Sarah felt a surge of triumph mixed with terror. The plan was working, but now she had to follow through on the most dangerous gamble of her career. "The trial by combat will commence in 18 hours, Kethvar continued. "Both fleets will withdraw to the edge of the Vorthan Nebula. The engagement will be monitored by neutral observers from the Galactic Trade Consortium to ensure compliance with Imperial law. Agreed, Sarah replied. May the best commander win, Admiral. As the communication ended, Sarah placed her hand on her stomach. The Vorthan Nebula stretched before them like a living thing, its swirling clouds of gas and energy pulsing with colors that had no names. Electric storms danced through the cosmic dust, creating patterns that shifted and changed with hypnotic beauty. It was the kind of place that inspired poets and killed spacers in equal measure. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching as both fleets took their positions at the nebula's edge. The Imperial ships formed a perfect formation, their massive hulls gleaming with polished armor and weapon arrays. In contrast, the human vessels looked rough and battered, jury-rigged modifications visible across their hulls like scars from countless battles. The neutral observers from the Galactic Trade Consortium had arrived an hour earlier, their sleek diplomatic vessel taking position equidistant from both fleets. Sarah had dealt with the consortium before. They were merchants and bureaucrats who valued profit over principles, but they were scrupulously honest when it came to legal matters. Their presence guaranteed that the trial by combat would be conducted according to Imperial law. General, all systems are ready, reported Chief Engineer Rodriguez over the internal communications. We've rerouted power from non-essential systems to boost our maneuvering thrusters. The new sensor modifications should help us navigate the energy storms, but I can't guarantee how long they'll hold up under nebula conditions. Sarah nodded, checking her chronometer. 15 minutes until the engagement began. How are our escorts? The Vigilant, Hammer, and Swift are in formation and ready to enter the nebula, replied Commander Torres. Their crews are nervous but determined. Through the viewing port, Sarah could see the Imperial escort ships taking their positions around the Eternal Glory. 3 destroyers, each one larger than her flagship, bristling with weapons and equipped with the finest technology the Empire could provide. They would be formidable opponents, even under normal circumstances. Incoming. Communication from Admiral Kethvar, announced Lieutenant. Hyoshi put him through. The Admiral appeared. On the main display, his reptilian features composed despite the unprecedented nature of what they were about to attempt. Behind him, Sarah could see the efficient bustle of the Imperial Bridge, officers moving with a precision that came from centuries of military tradition. General Chen, before we begin, I feel compelled to offer you one final opportunity to reconsider. What you are about to attempt is suicide. My ship outguns yours by a factor of 10, and my crew has trained for this type of engagement for years. Sarah smiled, and there was steel in her expression. Admiral, 5 years ago you said the same thing about this entire war. You told us that resistance was futile, that we would be crushed within weeks. How did that work out for you? Kethavar's expression darkened. This is different. In open combat, luck and tactics can overcome superior force, but the nebula is neutral to both of us. Your advantages in unconventional warfare will not serve you here. We'll see, Sarah replied calmly, though I appreciate your concern for my well-being. It's very maternal of you. The barb hit home. In Zeraphim culture, showing protective concern for a pregnant individual was expected behavior, but having that concern pointed out in a military context was deeply humiliating. Kethvar's scales darkened with anger. Consortium vessel neutral ground, this is Admiral Kethvar, he said, addressing the neutral observers. Are you prepared to monitor the engagement? This is Captain Vex of the neutral ground, came the reply in the melodious tones of the aquatic hegemony species. We are in position and ready to record the trial by combat. All parties may begin when ready. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Everything humanity had fought for, everything they had sacrificed, came down to the next few hours. All ships, this is General Chen, she announced on the fleet-wide channel. Today we prove that humans don't know how to quit. Today we show the galaxy that underestimating us is a fatal mistake. Whatever happens in that nebula, remember that we're fighting for the right to exist as free beings. That's worth any risk. The responses came flooding back from across the human fleet. Words of encouragement, promises of support, and the kind of grim determination that had kept humanity alive through 5 years of impossible war. Defiance. This is the Vigilant, came the voice of Captain Patricia Walsh. Ready to follow you into hell. General, Hammer reporting ready, added Captain James. Knox, let's show these. Imperial bastards, what human engineering can. Tourcy Swift standing by, concluded Captain Lisa. Park. Time to dance, Sarah. Felt a fierce pride surge through her chest. These people had followed her through the darkest days of the war, trusted her judgment when logic said they should surrender, and now they were willing to risk everything on her most desperate gamble yet. All ships begin approach to the nebula. Maintain formation until we cross the boundary. Then execute Pattern 7 on my command. The 4 human ships moved forward in diamond formation, their engines burning bright against the cosmic background. Behind them, the Imperial ships followed in their own precise formation, the eternal glory at the center like a predator surrounded by its pack. As they approached the nebula's edge, the sensor readings began to fluctuate. The electromagnetic storms that raged within the cosmic clouds interfered with everything from communications to targeting systems. Sarah had studied these effects extensively, but experiencing them firsthand was different from reading reports. Crossing the boundary in 30 seconds, reported the navigation officer. Sarah activated the ship-wide intercom. All hands, this is the General. We are about to enter the Vorthon Nebula for trial by combat against the Imperial flagship. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and watch out for your shipmates. Today we make history. The Defiance crossed into the nebula, and immediately the universe changed around them. The stars disappeared, replaced by swirling walls of gas that glowed with their own internal light. Energy discharges crackled through the cosmic dust, creating a constantly shifting maze of hazards and opportunities. Sensors are showing significant interference, reported Lieutenant Yoshi. Target resolution is down to 60% and falling. That's within acceptable parameters, Sarah replied. The Imperial ship will be experiencing the same problems, but they're not used to fighting in these conditions. Through the swirling clouds, she could see the massive bulk of the eternal glory following them into the nebula. The Imperial dreadnought moved with ponderous grace, its enormous engines maintaining perfect formation despite the interference. General, we're detecting energy buildup in the Imperial formation, warned the tactical officer. They're charging weapons. Sarah had expected this. Kethavar would want to end the engagement quickly, before the nebula's effects could level the playing field. All ships execute Pattern 7, split formation, and use the gas clouds for cover. The human ships scattered like a school of fish avoiding a predator, each one diving into different sections of the nebula. The Defiance plunged into a particularly dense cloud bank, its modified sensors struggling to maintain contact with the other ships. Imperial vessels are opening fire, reported Lieutenant Yoshi. The nebula lit up with weapon discharges as the Imperial ships attempted to target their scattered opponents. Most of the shots went wide, the energy beams distorted by the electromagnetic interference, but some found their marks. Hammer has taken a hit, came Captain Knox's voice over the communications. Port shields are down, but we're still operational. Sarah gritted her teeth. The plan depended on keeping all her ships mobile for as long as possible. If she lost even one escort, her tactical options would be severely limited. Hammer dived deeper into the cloud bank and initiate evasive maneuvers. Use the energy storms to mask your signature. As if to emphasize her point, a massive electrical discharge lit up the space around them, temporarily blinding their sensors and filling the bridge with the acrid smell of overloaded electronics. That was close, muttered Commander Torres. If one of those storms hits us directly, we'll lose everything except life support. That's the risk we all face, Sarah replied. But the Imperial ship is a bigger target, and they're not as maneuverable as we are. She was proven right moments later when the eternal glory emerged from a gas cloud directly in the path of a massive energy storm. The Imperial dreadnought's shields flared brilliant white as they absorbed the discharge, but Sarah could see fluctuations in their power grid through her sensors. Now, she whispered, then louder. All ships, execute attack pattern Delta. Focus fire on the Eternal Glory's shield generators. The human vessels burst from their hiding places like hunters springing a trap. Their weapons might be smaller than the Imperial guns, but they were faster and more accurate in the nebula's chaotic environment. The Defiance led the charge, its main guns spitting coherent energy beams that struck the Imperial dreadnought's shields with surprising effect. The modifications Chief Rodriguez had made to their weapons were designed specifically for this type of engagement, trading raw power for precision and penetration. Direct hits on target, reported the weapons officer. Their shields are holding, but we're causing fluctuations in their defensive grid. The other human ships added their fire to the assault, their smaller weapons finding gaps. The Eternal Glory's return fire was like the wrath of an angry god. Massive energy beams lanced through the swirling nebula, each shot carrying enough power to vaporize a city block. The Imperial gunners were skilled, compensating for the interference with targeting solutions that would have been impossible for lesser crews. Evasive maneuvers, Sarah shouted as warning klaxons screamed across the bridge. The Defiance twisted through 3 dimensions, its modified engines pushing the ship beyond its normal performance limits. One of the Imperial beams passed so close that the bridge lighting flickered and the smell of ozone filled the air. "Swift is hit," came Captain Park's voice over the communications, her normally calm tone cracking with strain. "We've lost main engines and weapon systems." Attempting emergency repairs, Sarah cursed silently. Losing the Swift this early would severely limit her tactical options. The small frigate had been their fastest ship, designed for hit-and-run attacks that exploited the Imperial formation's weak points. "Swift, can you maintain position?" she asked. "Negative, General. We're drifting toward a major energy storm. Recommend you continue the attack without us." It was exactly what Sarah had feared. Captain Park was a good officer, but she didn't understand the broader strategy. Every ship mattered in this engagement, even damaged ones. "Negative, Swift. All ships converge on Captain Park's position. We're going to use that energy storm." "General, that's suicide," protested Commander Torres. "Those storms can tear apart a ship's hull." "Not if we're careful," Sarah replied, her fingers dancing across the tactical display. "Torres, do you remember the Kepler station engagement 3 years ago?" Understanding dawned in the commander's eyes. "The gravitational slingshot maneuver. But General, that was around a moon, not an energy storm." "Same principle, different physics," Sarah said grimly. "Navigation. Plot a course that takes us close to the storm's edge. We're going to use its electromagnetic field to accelerate and change direction." The Defiance plunged deeper into the nebula, followed by the Vigilant and Hammer. Behind them, the Imperial ships pursued relentlessly, their superior firepower keeping the human vessels constantly on the defensive. "Range to the energy storm?" Sarah asked. 2,000 kilometers and closing," replied the navigation officer. "General, at this distance, the electromagnetic interference will knock out half our systems." "That's what I'm counting on," Sarah replied. She activated the ship-wide intercom. "All hands, prepare for electromagnetic pulse. Secure all loose equipment and switch to backup systems." The storm loomed ahead of them like a wall of living lightning, its internal structure visible through the swirling gases. Sarah had studied dozens of recordings of similar phenomena, learning to read the patterns that indicated the storm's rotation and internal currents. "Execute slingshot maneuver in 3, 2, 1. Now!" The Defiance dove toward the storm's edge, its hull groaning under forces that no human ship had been designed to withstand. The electromagnetic discharge was immediate and devastating. Bridge lights failed, backup systems struggled to maintain life support, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. But the plan worked. The storm's rotating magnetic field grabbed the human ships and flung them forward with tremendous acceleration, hurling them past the Imperial formation before Kethvar's gunners could adjust their targeting. "Systems coming back online," reported Lieutenant Yoshi, his voice shaking slightly. "We've lost 20% of our sensor array, but weapons and engines are functional." "Status of the other ships?" "Vigilant and Hammer both made it through," Commander Torres replied. The Swift used the electromagnetic discharge to restart her engines. "She's back in the fight." Sarah felt a surge of fierce pride. Her crews were performing miracles, pushing their ships and themselves beyond any reasonable limit. It was exactly the kind of desperate innovation that the Empire could never understand or counter. "Imperial ships are attempting to follow us around the storm," warned the tactical officer, "but they're having trouble with the gravitational effects. The Eternal Glory is too massive to execute tight maneuvers in this environment." Through the sensor display, Sarah could see the Imperial formation struggling to maintain cohesion as they navigated around the energy storm. The massive dreadnought size, which gave it overwhelming firepower in open space, was becoming a liability in the nebula's chaotic environment. "Now we press our advantage," Sarah announced. "All ships execute pattern Omega. Target the Eternal Glory's engine section." The human vessels emerged from the storm's electromagnetic shadow like ghosts materializing from the void. Their weapons had been recalibrated during the passage, modified to exploit the specific vulnerabilities that Sarah's intelligence teams had identified in Imperial ship design. The Defiance led the attack, its main guns focusing on the junction points where the Dreadnought's massive engines connected to its hull. These were necessarily weak spots, places where even Imperial engineering had to balance power output against structural integrity. "Direct hits on target," reported the weapons officer. "We're seeing secondary explosions in their engine bay." The other human ships added their firepower to the assault, their coordinated attack creating a cascade of damage that rippled through the Imperial vessel's systems. For the first time since the engagement began, the Eternal Glory seemed vulnerable. But Admiral Kethvar was not finished. The Imperial commander had not earned his reputation by panicking under pressure, and he quickly adapted to the changing tactical situation. "Imperial, escorts are moving to screen their flagship," observed Lieutenant Yoshi. "They're creating a defensive formation around the engine section, and they're charging." "Something big," added the tactical officer. "Energy readings are off the charts." Sarah frowned, studying the sensor data. The Imperials were drawing power from systems throughout their fleet, concentrating it into their flagship's main weapon array. Whatever they were planning, it would be devastating. "General," came Dr. Vasquez's voice over the intercom, "I'm reading dangerous stress levels in your vitals. You need to consider the effect this is having on your pregnancy." Sarah almost laughed. Here she was, engaged in the most important battle of her career while pregnant, and her doctor was worried about stress levels. "Elena, if we lose this fight, stress will be the least of our problems." But the doctor's words reminded her of something important. The Empire still didn't understand how to fight pregnant humans. They were applying conventional tactical doctrine to an unconventional opponent, and that might be their downfall. "Torres, open a channel to Admiral Kethvar." "General, this is hardly the time for conversation," the commander protested. "Trust me," Sarah replied. "Put him through." Admiral Kethvar's image appeared on the main display, his reptilian features showing strain as explosions lit up the space around his ship. "General Chen, if you wish to surrender, now would be an appropriate time." "Actually, I wanted to thank you, Admiral," Sarah replied calmly, even as the Defiance shook under return fire from the Imperial escorts. "Thank me." Kethvar's confusion was evident. "For providing such an excellent learning experience for my unborn child. The baby is being exposed to advanced tactical scenarios, complex problem-solving under pressure, and the kind of determination that will serve humanity well in future conflicts." Sarah could see the Admiral processing this information, trying to understand the implications. In Zeraphim culture, prenatal experiences were believed to have profound effects on offspring development. The idea of deliberately exposing an unborn child to combat stress was alien to his thinking. "You are insane," he said finally. "No, Admiral, I'm human, and that's something you'll never understand." She cut the communication and turned to her crew. "All ships prepare for maximum acceleration. We're going to do something that will either win this battle or get us all killed." "What's the plan, General?" asked Commander Torres. Sarah smiled, and it was the expression of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. "We're going to ram the Eternal Glory." The bridge fell silent as her crew processed this information. Ramming attacks were considered suicide tactics, last resort measures that guaranteed the destruction of both ships involved. "General," Torres said carefully, "that would kill everyone aboard both vessels, including your unborn child." "Not if we do it right," Sarah replied, "and not if we remember that humans are better at improvisation than any other species in the galaxy." She activated the tactical display, showing the relative positions of all ships in the engagement area. "The Eternal Glory is drawing power for their main weapon. That means their defensive systems are temporarily weakened. If we can coordinate a precise strike," understanding dawned on her officers' faces as they began to see the plan taking shape. It was insane, desperate, and exactly the kind of tactic that had kept humanity alive against impossible odds. "All ships," Sarah announced, "prepare for final assault. Today we prove that pregnant humans are the most dangerous force in the galaxy." The 4 human vessels turned toward the Imperial flagship, their engines burning bright as they accelerated into what would either be victory or oblivion. The 4 human ships accelerated toward the Eternal Glory in perfect formation, their engines pushed beyond safe limits as they closed the distance to the Imperial flagship. On every bridge, crews worked with desperate efficiency, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of their species. Distance to target, 8,000 kilometers in closing, reported Lieutenant Yoshi, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. Sarah watched the tactical display with the cold focus that had made her legendary among her troops. The Imperial flagship was indeed drawing massive amounts of power for its main weapon, just as she had predicted. But there was something else, a pattern in their energy signatures that didn't match standard Imperial doctrine. "Torres, are you seeing this?" she asked, highlighting anomalous readings on the display. Commander Torres studied the data, his expression growing troubled. "Those power fluctuations, General, I think they're charging more than just their main guns." "What do you mean?" "Look at the energy distribution. They're drawing power from life support, artificial gravity, even their communication systems. This isn't a weapon charge. It's something else entirely." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as the implications became clear. "They're not trying to destroy us. They're trying to destroy the entire nebula." It made horrible sense. If Admiral Kethvar couldn't win the trial by combat under its established rules, he would change the rules. A weapon powerful enough to destabilize the nebula's energy matrix would create a chain reaction that would annihilate everything within light years. "Can they do that?" asked Dr. Vasquez, who had joined them on the bridge despite the danger. "Imperial technology is more advanced than ours," Sarah replied grimly. "If they're willing to sacrifice their own ships, they could trigger a cascade failure that would turn this entire region into a dead zone." The ramming attack suddenly took on new urgency. They weren't just fighting for victory in a trial by combat. They were fighting to prevent a genocide that would make the current war look like a minor skirmish. "All ships, adjust course for maximum impact on the Eternal Glory's main reactor," Sarah ordered. "We need to stop them from completing that weapon charge." "General," came Captain Walsh's voice from the Vigilant, "our engineering teams have been monitoring Imperial power systems. If we can disrupt their energy flow at precisely the right moment, we might be able to cause a feedback loop that disables their weapons without destroying both fleets." Sarah considered this possibility. It was a long shot, requiring split-second timing and perfect coordination, but it offered hope of survival for both sides. "What do you need?" "All 4 ships need to impact the target simultaneously, hitting specific points on their hull that correspond to major power conduits. If even one of us is off by more than a few meters, the whole plan fails." It was an impossible precision requirement under normal circumstances, and they were attempting it in the middle of a cosmic storm while under heavy fire from Imperial escorts. But humans had been accomplishing impossible things for 5 years now. "Sending target coordinates to all ships," Sarah announced. "Remember, this isn't about destroying the enemy. It's about saving everyone." The Imperial escorts were firing continuously now, their weapons creating a deadly maze of energy beams that the approaching human ships had to navigate. The hammer took a direct hit that knocked out its starboard shield generators, but Captain Knox kept his ship on course with grim determination. 5,000 kilometers to target," reported the navigation officer. "Imperial flagship is beginning evasive maneuvers." The Eternal Glory was indeed trying to avoid the approaching attackers, but its massive size made quick maneuvering impossible in the nebula's dense environment. Admiral Kethvar had committed to his devastating weapon, and now he was trapped by that decision. "General, we're receiving a priority transmission from the neutral observers," announced Lieutenant Yoshi. "Put them through." Captain Vex of the neutral ground appeared on the display, his aquatic features showing obvious distress. "General Chen, our sensors are detecting massive energy buildup in the Imperial flagship. If that weapon is fired, it will violate every treaty governing warfare in populated space." "Can you stop them?" Sarah asked. "Our ship is not equipped for military intervention. However, under Article 12 of the Galactic Conflict Resolution Protocols, we can declare this engagement terminated due to illegal weapon deployment." Sarah shook her head. "That won't help us if they complete their weapon charge. The legal consequences will be irrelevant if we're all dead." 2,000 kilometers to target, came the steady voice of the navigation officer. The human ships were close enough now to see individual details on the Imperial flagship's hull. The massive vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, its sleek lines and predatory grace representing centuries of Imperial technological advancement. but it was also a symbol of the arrogance that had led the Empire to underestimate humanity. "All ships prepare for impact in 30 seconds, Sarah announced. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to save them from their own stupidity." Through the viewing port, she could see the Eternal Glory's main weapon array beginning to glow with accumulated energy. The Imperials were almost ready to fire their devastating shot, unaware that they were about to turn themselves and everyone else in the nebula into cosmic dust. "General," Dr. Vasquez said quietly, "I want you to know that I'm proud to serve with you. Your child will grow up knowing that their mother saved the galaxy." Sarah smiled, placing a hand on her still flat stomach. "If we survive this, Elena. If we survive this. 10 seconds to impact." The 4 human ships struck the Eternal Glory simultaneously, their carefully calculated impacts hitting the precise points that Captain Walsh's engineers had identified. The collision was devastating but controlled, each vessel transferring its kinetic energy directly into the Imperial ship's power conduits. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Electrical discharges cascaded through the dreadnought systems as feedback loops overloaded power grids throughout the massive vessel. The main weapon array, on the verge of firing, suddenly went dark as its energy supply was cut off. But the collisions had been carefully designed to disable rather than destroy. Instead of penetrating the Imperial hull, the human ship's reinforced bows crumpled on impact, absorbing the kinetic energy while leaving both fleets intact. "Status report," Sarah called out as emergency lighting flickered on across the bridge. "All systems are offline except for life support and basic communications," reported Commander Torres. "But we're alive, and so are they." Through the static-filled communications, reports began coming in from the other human ships. All 4 vessels had survived the impact, though they were badly damaged and effectively helpless. "General, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Kethvar," announced Lieutenant Yoshi. The Imperial commander appeared on the display, his reptilian features showing a mixture of shock and something that might have been respect. Behind him, his bridge was dark except for emergency lighting, and his crew was working frantically to restore basic systems. "General Chen," he said slowly, "your actions have prevented a catastrophe that would have destroyed both our fleets. Under the circumstances, I am prepared to declare this trial by combat concluded." Sarah leaned back in her command chair, feeling exhaustion wash over her for the first time in hours. "What are your terms, Admiral?" "No terms," Kethvar replied, his voice carrying a note of wonder. "You have demonstrated something that I did not think possible. You have shown mercy to an enemy who was prepared to commit genocide. This is not a concept that exists in Imperial military doctrine." He paused, consulting with officers off-screen before continuing. "Furthermore, your tactical brilliance in this engagement has proven that humanity possesses strategic capabilities that the Empire cannot afford to ignore. Attempting to conquer your species would be a mistake of historic proportions." Sarah felt hope beginning to bloom in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. "What are you proposing?" "A treaty. Full recognition of human independence, establishment of formal diplomatic relations, and mutual assistance agreements for future conflicts. The Empire has many enemies, General Chen. Perhaps it is time we had human allies instead of human adversaries." The bridge of the Defiance erupted in cheers, but Sarah held up a hand for silence. "There will be conditions, Admiral. Reparations for the damage done to our colonies, compensation for our military losses, and guarantees that the Empire will not interfere with human expansion into unclaimed territory." "Agreed," Kethvar replied without hesitation. "And General, I owe you an apology. When this engagement began, I believed that pregnancy made you weak and unsuitable for command. I now understand that I was completely wrong." Sarah smiled, the first genuine expression of joy she had shown in months. "Pregnancy doesn't make us weak, Admiral. It makes us willing to do anything to protect our children. And in this case, that included protecting yours." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Terra Station, watching as ships from dozens of different species docked at the massive orbital facility. The station had been built in the Vorthan Nebula, at the exact coordinates where the trial by combat had taken place. It served as both a memorial to the battle and a symbol of the new era of cooperation that had emerged from the conflict. Her pregnancy was now obvious, her uniform modified to accommodate her growing belly. She had continued commanding her fleet throughout the treaty negotiations. though Dr. Vasquez had finally convinced her to accept a ground-based posting for the final months of her pregnancy. "General Chen," came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Admiral Kethvar approaching, his reptilian features carrying an expression that she had learned to recognize as amused approval. "Or should I say, Ambassador Chen?" Sarah smiled. Her dual appointment as both military commander and diplomatic representative had been controversial within human government circles, but the Empire had specifically requested that she serve as the primary liaison between their species. "Admiral, I wasn't expecting you until next week. How was your journey from Imperial space?" "Enlightening," Kethvar replied, moving to stand beside her at the observation window. "I stopped at 3 human colonies on the way here. Your terraforming techniques are remarkably efficient. My engineers are eager to study your methods, and I'm sure our scientists would be happy to share, in exchange for some of your gravity manipulation technology." The trade agreements between humanity and the Empire had exceeded everyone's expectations. Human innovation combined with Imperial resources was creating technological advances that neither species could have achieved alone. More importantly, the example of human Imperial cooperation was inspiring other species to reconsider their own conflicts. "How is your offspring developing?" Kethvar asked, gesturing toward her belly with the careful politeness that his species showed toward pregnant individuals. "Very active," Sarah replied, placing a hand on her stomach. "Dr. Vasquez says the baby's brain activity is unusually high for this stage of development. She thinks the stress of command during pregnancy may have enhanced neural development." Fascinating. In Xeraphim culture, offspring exposed to complex decision-making scenarios during gestation often become exceptional leaders. "Your child may be destined for greatness," Sarah chuckled. "Let's hope they choose a less dramatic path than their mother. The galaxy could use some peace and quiet for a few decades." A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Sarah activated the station's main display, revealing the face of Captain Santos from the intelligence vessel Shadow. "General, we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim territories. 3 more species have requested mediation services for territorial disputes. They specifically asked for human negotiators." Sarah nodded. In the months since the treaty signing, humanity had gained a reputation as effective mediators and peacekeepers. Their willingness to find creative solutions to impossible problems was becoming legendary throughout the galaxy. "What's the nature of the disputes?" she asked. "Standard territorial conflicts, but with some unusual complications. The crystalline hierarchy and the void swimmers both claim the same star system, but neither species can actually survive on the planets involved. They're fighting over principle rather than practical need." Admiral Kethvar made a sound that Sarah had learned was the Xeraphim equivalent of laughter. Only humans would see opportunity in such a situation. "What are you planning?" Sarah studied the star charts that Captain Santos had transmitted, her tactical mind automatically analyzing the strategic implications. "Set up a meeting with both sides. If neither species can use the planets, maybe we can find someone who can. The galaxy is full of refugees from the war. Perhaps it's time to start giving them new homes." "I'll arrange the negotiations," Captain Santos replied. "When should we schedule them?" Sarah glanced at Dr. Vasquez, who had appeared on the observation deck with her usual collection of medical scanners and concerned expressions. "After the baby is born. I think I've pushed my luck far enough for 1 year." Dr. Vasquez smiled. "Sensible decision. Though knowing you, you'll probably want to negotiate trade agreements from the delivery room." "Don't give her ideas," Admiral Kethvar said in mock horror. "The last thing the galaxy needs is humans discovering that childbirth can be used as a negotiating tactic." As the conversation continued, Sarah found herself reflecting on the strange turns her life had taken. A year ago, she had been a desperate military commander fighting an impossible war. Now she was an ambassador, negotiating peace between species that had been enemies for centuries. The irony wasn't lost on her that pregnancy, the condition the Empire had seen as her greatest weakness and had become the key to her greatest victory. The biological imperative to protect her unborn child had driven her to find solutions that saved both sides, rather than simply defeating the enemy. "General," came another voice from the communication system. This time it was Commander Torres calling from the bridge of the Defiance. "We're receiving a priority message from Earth. President Martinez wants to speak with you about the Andromedan situation." Sarah sighed. The Andromedan galaxy had been sending probe ships into the Milky Way for months, apparently seeking new territory for their expanding civilization. Early contact attempts had been unsuccessful, and tensions were rising throughout the local galactic community. "Tell the president I'll take the call in my office," she replied. "And Torres? Start preparing contingency plans for long-range diplomatic missions. Something tells me we're going to need them." As she made her way toward her office, Admiral Kethvar walked beside her. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when this war began, the Empire saw humanity as a minor annoyance that would be quickly eliminated. Now, 5 years later, humans have become the most influential species in local space. How do you explain such a transformation?" Sarah considered the question as they walked through corridors filled with beings from dozens of different species, all working together on projects that would benefit the entire galactic community. "I think it's because we never learned how to give up. Other species have concepts like acceptable losses and strategic retreats. Humans have a genetic inability to accept defeat, especially when our families are threatened. And pregnancy intensifies those protective instincts." "Pregnancy doesn't make us weak, Admiral. It makes us dangerous in ways that nobody expects. A pregnant human will do anything to protect their child, including sacrificing themselves to save their enemies." They reached her office, where President Martinez was waiting on the main communication screen. Behind him, Sarah could see the familiar skyline of New Geneva, the capital city of the Human Colonial Federation. "General Chen," the president began, "we need to discuss the Andromedan situation. Our xenobiology experts believe we may be facing the most advanced civilization we've ever encountered." Sarah settled into her chair, her hand automatically moving to rest on her belly where the baby was kicking energetically. "Mr. President, if there's one thing I've learned in the past year, it's that advanced civilizations can be just as surprised by human behavior as primitive ones. Maybe it's time we introduced the Andromedans to the concept of pregnant human diplomacy." Admiral Kethvar made that sound again that passed for laughter among his people. "I almost feel sorry for them. They have no idea what they're about to encounter." As the meeting began, Sarah felt the baby kick again, as if responding to the discussion of new challenges and adventures. She smiled, wondering what kind of galaxy her child would inherit. If the past year had taught her anything, it was that humans had a talent for turning impossible situations into opportunities for growth and cooperation. The war was over, but humanity's greatest adventures were just beginning, and somewhere in the depths of space, new civilizations were about to discover what the Galactic Empire had learned the hard way. Never underestimate a pregnant human with a plan. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the station's viewing ports, filled with possibilities that no one could have imagined when the war began. For the first time in years, Sarah Chen looked toward the future with hope instead of desperation. The galaxy was vast, complex, and dangerous, but it was also full of potential allies who just didn't know it yet. Her child would grow up in a universe where humans were known not as conquerors, but as the species that could find solutions when everyone else saw only problems. It was a legacy worth fighting for, and worth the risks she had taken to achieve it. In the end, the pregnant general's proposal had indeed brought the Galactic Empire to its knees, not through force, but through the simple demonstration that mercy and creativity were more powerful than any weapon ever devised.